Welcome to your first hour in Unreal Engine. As this is a course for those just starting out, we will be taking a leisurely stroll through the engine while building out a small level. In our travels, I will be sure to unpack all the fundamentals so you can be more confident and capable moving forward. Please understand, however, Unreal Engine is far too wide and deep of an application to teach you everything in an hour. I urge you, however, to leave whatever intimidation you have at the door. Sure, Unreal Engine is a vast tool. Still, a nudge in the right direction, and you can begin to harness the power of Unreal very rapidly. This is a series designed to be that nudge. All right, let's start where everything should start, at the beginning. With Unreal Engine, the beginning is the Epic Games Launcher. This is the most common entry point for new users, and if you have just gotten started, this is probably where you began as well. Upon starting the launcher, you will likely be confronted with a screen similar to mine. This is effectively a home page. It allows you to see all the hottest new games available from the Epic Games Store. Moving down the left side, we see we have a store page, which lists all of the games available for free and for purchase on the store. Next, we have the library, where you can see and manage all the games that you may have purchased. Moving down another tab, we have the networking tools, allowing you to build the list of your friends and coworkers so you can communicate easily with them via chat. The last tab, labeled Unreal Engine, will take us to the developer area of the launcher. As developers, this area is primarily what we care about. Once clicked, new tabs appear across the top while presenting you with a new home-styled page. This is Unreal Engine's main page. Like the home page, it lists everything new and exciting in the world of the Unreal Engine. The difference is that in here, it's focused entirely on development. Take time to explore it, as there is almost always something inspirational, exciting, useful, or just plain cool found on this page. Moving on to the Learn tab, we have suggested learning resources, as well as hot links to documentation, video tutorials, and the community wiki page. Shifting over to the marketplace, you'll find both free and paid content. Be sure to peruse this store, as there is much in there that can help any project come alive more quickly. Tools, models, sounds, complete projects, scripted assets, and more can be found with a quick search, so be sure to check it out. Finally, we have the library. This is the area you will use the most. Beginning at the top, we will have our engine versions. If you don't have anything listed here, you will need to install the engine. To do this, press the plus sign, then select the engine version you want to download. As you are just starting out, I would suggest downloading the most recent edition. Once selected, simply press Install to get the process started. Moving down a little further, we have our projects list. As we create new projects, they will be listed here, and are easily launched from this menu. Sliding down the page a bit further, we come to the Vault section. This is where all of our plugins and purchased marketplace content reside. Simply click Add to Project to install these kits to your project. Unreal Studio is a tool for bringing high-poly, non-optimized CAD geometry into Unreal Engine. If you don't see this in your launcher, don't worry. It is an optional plugin that is currently under development, but it is freely available. Simply register and follow the instructions if you are interested. As we have now covered the launcher, I want to point out that we can get some useful options in our launcher settings that are geared for developers. We can go there by clicking on the gear on the bottom left just above our name. Here we can choose to manage or update the games portion of the launcher. For example, we can enable Hide Games Library, which will turn off some of the consumer elements of the launcher. This is especially useful in office environments. You also may wish to disable starting the UE launcher upon startup. Neither of these two options are critical, but do make the launcher more down to business. Okay, well, that covers the launcher. Hopefully you found this little walkthrough helpful. Once you have a version of the Unreal Engine installed, begin the next tutorial in the course to learn how to create your first project. Creating a project in Unreal Engine is a rather simple task. We will click some buttons, wait a few seconds, and your project will be created on your drive. There is a lot of magic that is going to happen behind the curtain, however. and it can be a little unnerving to some people, especially in regards to saving, moving, and copying. So let's get that conceptual problem out of the way first. Generally speaking, when we create things in a typical program, the act of saving simply creates and stores all the data in a single file. The same is true for virtually every content creation tool, from Photoshop to Word to Maya. Unreal Engine works a little bit differently. It is best to think of Unreal Engine as a toolkit and projects as a network of files. It also creates and saves many types of files, for example, levels, assets, and materials. It also aggregates content from a multitude of sources. Sounds, textures, images, and many other things can be brought into the project. As you can imagine, this would make quite a mess if not managed. So, to keep it all contained, Unreal Engine has a mandatory project structure. While working in the editor, Unreal Engine will maintain virtually everything for you. However, understanding this will certainly help as you experience the engine further. Okay, so let's begin by creating our project and review what I just said and how it applies to what we create. In our launcher, click on the Launch button to open up the game engine. Give it a moment to launch. Now, this window shares our project list from the launcher before it, and you can launch your projects from here as well. To create a new project, let's instead click on the New Project tab. This pane allows us to decide some of the fundamentals for our game. For example, we can choose a Blueprint-based project, a C++-based project. For this course, we want to create a Blueprint-based project. This will allow us to build and deploy our project without the need for Visual Studio. Let's go ahead and pop into the Blueprint tab for now. In this window, we will be presented with a list of project templates. These templates, although not complete games, are very useful in giving you a start on some of the more complex types of games. We have a first-person template, vehicle templates, side-scroller templates, and many more. For the purposes of this exercise, let's go ahead and choose the third-person template. Now, below the templates, we can further define our project. I will leave my target hardware, quality, and content as their defaults. We can always adjust these options later in the project settings if needed, so don't worry about making the wrong decision here. So now, let's go ahead and select where our project will be saved. I'll put mine on the desktop in a folder called First Hour Project. Once the folder is selected, I'll name my project First Hour Project and hit the Create Project button. After a short delay, you should be presented with the main window. Before we get into how to navigate this interface, I want to draw your attention to the panel all the way at the bottom of your screen. This is your project's content directory. If you delve into it, you will see there are many files of different types. Right-clicking on a file will reveal a plethora of options. Let's select Show in Explorer. Notice that it opened Windows Explorer in a directory within your project's folder. As you can see, our project is not a singular file, but instead is a network of files and folders. This is important for two reasons. The first is that if you want to move your project to another place, you will need to move the entire structure. Secondly, notice that when we work on our project, that there will not just be one file that is saved. Instead, we will be saving many files as we add and edit our assets in Unreal. The project structure is fundamental to understanding and growing with Unreal, and after working with Unreal for a while, this will make a lot more sense. Okay, so now that we have our project created, let's go ahead and begin to explore the way to manage some of the basics of the UI interface. Since we already started in the content browser, let's review some of its features. As you may expect, the content browser has a very capable and robust search and filter tool. These will become more and more valuable as your project grows. If you click the Show or Hide Sources panel button here on the left, you will see that you can get an Explorer-style view, making it somewhat easier and more comfortable to locate and manage files. In the right panel, we have our content browser with Preview. This is where most of your content management will occur. You can rename, move, or edit your files from here. Lastly, on the bottom right, there is a View Options menu. Selecting it can give you hidden access to things like the engine content, while also allowing you to customize the way your content browser looks. Note that anything you bring into your project will be brought in through the content browser by using the import functionality. We will get to that more as we progress, but this content browser contains all the models, textures, and other assets your project will ingest. You can easily bring assets from the content browser into your level by simply dragging and dropping. Moving up to the Modes tab, we will find a series of assets we can place in our levels. Lights, generic geometry, fog, post-process effects, and more can all be found here in the Modes tab. The Modes panel also contains the level editing tools. Within, you can find vertex painting, landscape tools, foliage painting, and even some very simple modeling tools. Progressing into the main window, we get to our editor viewport. The viewport shows your open level. We can add assets to our level from our content browser or the Modes panel by simply dragging and dropping. To navigate in the viewport, simply right-click and drag to rotate the camera. Left-click and drag to move forward and backward. And finally, you can use the middle mouse button to pan around the scene. If you have a mouse wheel, you can also move forward and backwards with it. Alternatively, you can use the WASD style movement by holding left-click and using W, A, S, and D keys to move forward, left, back, and right respectively. This is generally how I navigate my levels. The speed of movement can be adjusted from the camera icon here in the top right. The higher the number, the faster we move. Moving or transforming the orientation of objects in our scene is also relatively easy. After selecting an object, click the Move, Rotate, or Scale tools found in the top of the window to manipulate the object or use the spacebar to cycle through them. Alternatively, you can use Maya-like hotkeys, W to move, E to rotate, and R to scale. Now, you may have noticed that as you transform your objects, you are snapping to a grid. Sometimes this can be very, very helpful. Sometimes not so much. Just to the right of the transform tools, you can adjust these snap settings for each of the tools independently. You can also enable and disable snapping altogether by simply clicking on their snap icons. Snapping is enabled when it is highlighted in orange. There are far too many hotkeys to list them all, but I'd like to mention some that I find useful and use all the time. In order to turn off all widgets and see the game in a preview-like view, use the G key to toggle game mode. Using Control plus a number will allow you to bookmark your viewport. Then you can press the same number to snap back to your camera. We call this bookmarking. Using F11 will toggle you in and out of immersive mode. And finally, F will focus on any selected object. Mastering these hotkeys is definitely advisable, but the actions can of course be found in the menus as well. Leaving the viewport and taking a look further right, we come across our World Outliner tab. This tab shows a complete list of everything that is populated in your level. This tab will become increasingly important as your levels grow in size. You can use this panel to quickly locate and edit asset instances in your level. Note that you can also quickly find things using context-sensitive search found at the top of the pane. Moving down, we have our Detail tab, directly below our World Outliner. The contents of this tab will change based on the item selected in the level, and will allow you to edit the parameters of the objects in your scene. Selecting a light, for example, will display the light's parameters for editing. Selecting a post-process volume gives you options relative to post-processing effects, and so on. As you can see, it gives us a quick and easy way to adjust any items in our level. Coming back to the center top, we have our toolbar. On the left is a convenient Save Current button, allowing you to save your level with one click. The toolbar also gives quick access to your world and project settings. You will certainly need to know where they are located as your skill grows, so I'd suggest making a mental note of their location. Additionally, your level blueprint, cinematics, build tools, and playtest tools are also found up here. Be sure to recognize that any of the buttons on this tab with an arrow on the right can fly out to show more options. Lastly, we have our typical pull-down menu options across the top: File, Edit, Window, and Help. In the File menu, you will find the ability to create or open new levels, save content, and also provides access to the deployment tools. For now, I'd like you to pay special attention to the Save All item. In the beginning, I would suggest you use this whenever you make significant changes. It will ensure anything you have open is saved related to your project. Moving over to the Edit menu reveals typical copy-paste tools, as well as reiterates the level and world settings. Sliding over, the Window menu allows you to open a variety of additional toolboxes you may need. The Help menu gives you quick access to a variety of learning tools available. Before moving to the next tutorial, take some time to familiarize yourself with the UE editor. Why not check out some of the toolboxes found in the Windows dropdown? Try moving objects around in the level. Try out some of those hotkeys I mentioned. Just poke around and have some fun. Once you feel you are ready for some more, click into the next tutorial. So now that we understand a little bit about how to navigate the UE4 landscape, let's start to populate ourselves a little level. This third-person template does give us some basic functionality, and we can certainly play with it. But it would be a lot more fun if we modify it and make a scene that is less gray. To do this, we are going to need some additional assets. Luckily, UE4 gives us several ways to get content into our game. We can add starter content, we can use the marketplace to download and add assets, or we can download an entire project and migrate content from it. We can also import assets created from third-party tools like Maya and Substance Painter. All in all, UE4 makes getting content into your game a rather easy process. Okay, so let's go ahead and begin with starter content. When we created our project, we had the option to add the starter content then, but we selected not to use it. As we will need at least some content to work with, let's go ahead and add it to our project now. To do this, simply click on the Add New button in the Content browser. Then select Add Feature or Content Pack. In the next dialog, we can add content from any of the other templates. For now, however, let's select the tab for Starter Content. Then let's select Starter Content and click Add to Project. Okay, excellent. Now the Starter Content folder has been added to our project's content directory. Easy, right? Feel free to throw some of that content into your level by simply dragging and dropping it. Great. Now, the starter content is a quick and easy way to add some basic content to your project. But what if you wanted something a bit more specific, like a unique environment? Let's head back over to the launcher and see what we can find. Let's take a look at the Marketplace tab, as there is tons of free and paid content to choose from. Now, if you look under Free, Epic Games Content, we can find the asset pack Infinity Blade Grasslands. Go ahead and add it to your cart. Then click on the shopping cart and check out. Don't worry, it's free, and no credit card will be required. Once complete, if you jump back to your library and look at the bottom of your page, you should see Infinity Blades Grasslands with an Add to Project button. This will be typical of any download of the type Asset Pack, as it has been packaged for easy installation. Cool, so let's add it to our project. Do this by clicking the Add to Project button, then selecting the project, first our project. Okay, now that it is added, we should see a new folder in our project called Infinity Blade Grasslands, and within it a series of meshes, materials, blueprints, and more. All of these assets are now part of your project. Great. Okay, so now we have assets in our project from the starter content, and we have successfully installed a content plugin from the launcher. Awesome. So adding content from the marketplace is really cool, but what if we wanted to get specific assets from, let's say, another project? How exactly would that work? In Unreal Engine, you migrate assets from one project to another using the editor. Don't try to copy the files manually from your hard drive. Okay, let's give it a try. Our first step will be to return to our launcher, and this time let's switch to the Learn tab. Once there, locate the Realistic Rendering project. Then download and create a new realistic rendering project on your desktop. Okay, great. Now that the realistic rendering project has successfully been created, I'm going to navigate to it and double-click on the U project to hot launch the project. If you have a slower or older computer, you may wish to close down your first hour project, but most modern computers should have no trouble running two instances of UE4 at the same time. Either way, once launched, you should see the realistic rendering scene before you. To migrate the assets, in the Content browser, let's navigate to the ArcViz folder, then Meshes, then select the couch for now. To migrate this to another project, right-click on it and select Asset Actions, then select Migrate. Notice that in the following dialog box, multiple files will be shown for that one couch. UE4 has already looked through the project and found any assets that relate to the couch. All textures, meshes, and materials will be included in the migration. Perfect. Now we can simply click OK. In the next dialog box, we will select where we want to migrate to. We will need to locate our first hour project content directory. The assets are copied to the other project, so let's choose the first hour project, then make sure to select the content directory. Confirm this location by clicking Select Folder. The files are now being migrated. Now, what if we wanted to take all of the content in our realistic rendering project and not just a singular asset? Let's take a look. So in our last migration, we selected just one item to migrate. Now, let's try navigating to the root of our content folder. Now, right-click on the ArchViz folder since it contains all the models, textures, and materials. And just as before, let's right-click and select Migrate. Once again, we get a list, albeit a much longer list. Since this is expected, let's go ahead and export. Click OK to confirm you want to continue. Great. Now let's locate our first hour project again and select the content directory. And let's confirm. Awesome. We can now close the realistic rendering project. It's no longer needed. And we can go ahead and jump back to our first hour project. You should now see the ArcViz folder at the root of your directory structure. Hopefully this shows that as you build projects, any content you create for any project can be brought into another project with similar ease. Alright, so at this point we have covered installing starter content, installing plugin style content, and even content migration. As you can see, there are a lot of ways to get things into your project. Now, the last method is to add custom assets to your project using the import. With import, we can import multiple file formats. Sounds, 3D meshes, Alembic animations, and much more can come directly into your project using the import tool. If you consider the Datasmith plugin, you can even import entire CAD projects. Anyhow, we have enough content in our project to begin playing around and getting comfy in UE4. So let's start having some fun, shall we? In our next lesson, we will be creating a new blank level and having some fun in Engine. I'll see you there. As we move forward into this next video, we are going to start constructing a little level and setting up our basic lighting. Then, from all the various elements we imported into our project, we will start to lay out a basic level. Okay, let's get started by creating a new blank level. To do that, let's navigate to our root content folder in the Content browser. Now, let's create a new folder by right-clicking and selecting New Folder. Now let's rename that folder to Levels, and let's open it up. Okay, great. Now, levels are effectively the container for a scene we want to make. The average project will consist of multiple levels, but must have at least one. It is within a level that our assets, lights, effects, sounds, and all other asset types will live. Let's go ahead and create our first level. Right-click and under the Create section, choose Level. Let's rename it to My First Level. Okay, great. Now let's double-click it and open it up. If prompted, choose to save or discard your level, whatever you see fit. Okay, great. Now, you should be looking at a scene that is 100% blank. Now, let's go ahead and use UE4's context-sensitive search to find SM_EXO_bridge and drag one of the floor tile assets into the level. Now, there are things you may notice when you do this. First, that upon dropping the asset into the level, nothing visually happened. And secondly, that your world outliner seems to have added the asset. Curious, huh? Why, if it is in the outliner, do we not actually see it? Well, UE4 is much like the real world. It tries to make sure that all the math works as naturally as possible, and it does this by using physically based materials. As with the real world, without light, there can be nothing seen. Our eyes work entirely off reflected light, and so does UE4. Therefore, if we want to see anything, we need to have a source of light. It's an important concept we will always need to consider, especially as scenes and their lighting become more complex. Okay, so to add our first light, let's go ahead and drop a simple directional light into the scene. We can find the directional light in the lights section of the mode panel. Once found, just drag it into your scene. You should now be able to see that little tile sitting there. Okay, so when we dragged in the tile, it may have been placed anywhere in our scene, as we have yet to give it a true position. We can easily do this by using the Details panel and typing in 0 tab 0 tab 0 and pressing the return in the location vector inputs. We can also use the F key to focus the viewport since it is probably moved out of the view somewhat. Let's also select our directional light and set it to something like 0, 0, 100. This way it'll be centered on our scene, but raised off the floor a little bit. In the top right of our viewport, let's go ahead and set snapping to more closely match the size of our tiles and make it a little easier for us to quickly lay out a floor. In the drop-down panel, let's select a snap of 100 to make it a bit easier to line up our tiles. Great. Okay, now let's go ahead and hold the Alt key while dragging the tile with the Move tool. Notice that it makes a duplicate of the tile. Let's go ahead and drag out a total of 5 for our first row. Cool. So now we know how to duplicate assets in our level rather quickly. Notice that these duplicates are auto-populated in our outliner as well. Since our floor should still be a bit bigger, let's go ahead and select all 5 in the outliner. Now let's repeat our Alt-Drag operation to duplicate all the selected tiles quickly another 5 times. We should now have a 25 square floor plan. So now we have a little floor we can work with. Let's go ahead and give our level its first playtest. In the top ribbon panel, let's select the play button. When we do so, our character will be spawned, and depending on where in our level your camera is, you will either land on the tiles or fall endlessly through the level. We have found our first bug. To fix this rather simple bug, we simply need a player start. We can find one of those in the Modes panel. Let's type in Start in the Modes panel search and drag the player start to our game. While we are at it, let's set the position to 0, 0, 200 in the Details panel. Great. Now our character should begin right in the center of our tiles. Let's give it another test. Awesome. Now we're getting somewhere. Now, having a pure black background is cool, I guess, but I'm betting a bit of a sky might be even better. Let's now add our next lighting component, atmospheric fog. It too can be found in the Modes panel by searching for fog. Let's go ahead and drag it in and set its position to 0, 0, 300. Perfect. Now we get a nice simple horizon and some soft haze. We can control the fog in the Details panel, and tinkering with it can give us some nice softening effects for distant objects. You may also notice there is an emulated sunspot in the fog. We can attach this fog to a directional light to more accurately represent the sun. Let's go ahead and do that now. First, select our directional light in the Details panel. Then let's search for fog. You should now see atmospheric fog sunlight. Let's go ahead and check it on. Immediately you should see the color of the fog adjust to our skylight's color. If we select our directional light and rotate it, you should also see that the sunspot follows correctly, and it even adjusts accurately as the sun dips towards the horizon. The next item intrinsic to lighting is our reflection capture. Let's add a spherical reflection capture from the Modes menu. Simply search for reflection and you should see it. Now, set its position to 0, 0, 500. Great. Now we just need to get it to capture our scene. To do that, click on the side of the Build panel and drag down to Build Reflection Captures, and then Release. Once complete, you will now have a more believable reflection profile. Okay, great. We have the beginnings of a nice level. At this point, you should be more comfortable moving around your scene, and placing and positioning assets should start to feel natural. Let's now take some time to play with the content and add some additional assets to our scene. There are a ton of assets buried in this project to help your scene come to life, and an easy way to quickly locate them is using filtering. For example, we know we are going to want to find all the static meshes we can place in our level. By using a filter, we can quickly accomplish this. First, let's clear our content search, then under Filters, enable the static mesh. Notice the new filter button available right below the content search. This allows you to quickly enable and disable that filter. So when enabled, we can now see every static mesh in our project in one easy-to-review list. Super useful, huh? Okay, so now that we can see all the placeable meshes in our scene, go ahead and start dragging some of the assets into your scene and create something you are happy with. It shouldn't take long to start to create something rather cool. To give you an idea what is possible in the kit you now have at your disposal, this is where I took my level to. But I did give myself a nice walled area to work with, and using the assets in the list, you should be able to do something similar. Don't feel pressured to make a masterpiece, but do spend some time trying to make something visually interesting. So as we move deeper into the lighting, we have something more dynamic than a floor to work with. Have some fun. Spend maybe 15-20 minutes or so. For the scene you see before you, I spent about an hour, but yours does not have to be this complete. Have fun, play, and I will see you when you are ready to continue in the next tutorial. With a little effort, you probably have a scene now looking something like this. You may have some nice forms starting to show, and hopefully the landscape you created is a bit dynamic. If you got really into it, you may have even started adding in some little details like statues, barrels, etc. There are also some things you probably struggled with a little bit. Hopefully, however, you are happy with what is in front of you, and you feel a bit more confident dragging things into your level and adjusting their positions, rotations, and scales as needed. If so, nice work. Unless you jumped ahead and added in more lights, the lighting should be rather harsh and the shadows are black. We also have nothing at all dynamic with our lighting. It's just flat and kind of boring looking. The most glaring issue is that we have no fill light of any kind to take out these shadows. We only have a direction light. Therefore, if in shadow, there is no light hitting it at all. In real time, it is very difficult to calculate that kind of light. Traditionally, that light is called bounced light. We do, however, have a type of light that happens to be purpose-built to help us with that. It is called a skylight, and it can be also found in the Modes panel. It will give us the ambient lighting we need, so let's drag that in, and let's set its position to 0, 0, 400. Amazing. Our shadows are already vastly improved. Great. Now, it may be tempting to make adjustments to the skylight to control its ambient power. I would suggest not doing that, however. Generally, the defaults will be correct, and give a good indication that the lighting itself needs to be adjusted, not the ambient properties. Now that we have ambient light, we will begin to see our next issue. As we move around our scene and go towards darker areas and lighter areas, you will likely notice that the overall exposure seems to be compensating. That's because it is. And as cool a feature as it may be, it is not very helpful when you're trying to get your light balanced. We need a stable exposure in order to get our lighting right. In order to control this aspect of our rendering and many others, we have a useful tool called a post-process volume. With it, we can affect all cameras in the scene from a singular control. Let's go ahead and grab one from our Modes panel and drop it into our scene. Just search for Post, and it should come right up. Great. Now let's go ahead and set its position to 0, 0, 0. Next, let's slide on down to the Lens section and look for the exposure min and max. Let's set them both to 1. This will force adaptive exposure to be locked at the default exposure. Lastly, let's do a quick search in the post-process volume for infinite. and make sure that infinite extent is enabled. This will give it complete domain over our level rather than contained to a specific area. Now if we look around, we should have a very stable exposure. Excellent. The next addition we will make to our scene will be to add a sky sphere. Simply type sky in the mode search panel, and you should see BP_sky_sphere. Once found, drag it into your scene and set its position also to 000. Great. Like the atmospheric fog, the sky sphere is best when linked to a directional light. Let's go ahead and use the drop-down labeled Directional Light Actor to do that. Just select your directional light and you should see the change. Now we have a nicer sky that we have more control over. Feel free to tinker with the controls, but I'm going to leave this all at default. Excellent. At this point, we have a perfectly acceptable environment lighting setup. We just need to dial it in. Before we do that, however, let's make sure all of our elements for lighting are organized so that we can easily adjust things. In the World Outliner, Control-click to multi-select our sky sphere, direction light, atmospheric fog, and skylight. Next, right-click and select Move to New Folder. Name that folder World Lighting. The exclamation point will ensure it stays on top of our list so we can easily access it for overall lighting setup. Perfect. Now, starting with the direction light, let's adjust our brightness. Let's set it down to 1. That should give us a nice duskish intensity. Excellent. Things are already feeling a bit better. Using the Rotate tool, let's get our sun to be situated closer to the horizon so it feels a bit more like dusk lighting. You will notice that as you rotate the directional light, the sunspot no longer updates. Simply disable your sky sphere for the moment, and you will be able to see your sunspot update normally. Once you get your sun in a nice low position on the horizon, simply re-enable your sky sphere and click the Refresh Material button. Perfect. The sun is right where I want it. Next, let's go ahead and get our sunspot to start acting a little more like a sun. Alive. If we look into the sky and take note of our sun, it's okay, but it certainly lacks any kind of charisma. To give it some life, let's jump over to our direction light and enable Light Shaft Occlusion and Light Shaft Bloom. This will give us a halo around our sun. If you drift around your scene, you should see that the obscuring objects help define the shape and cast of the light. Awesome, but wow, it's ugly and wildly out of control. No worries, though. If we jump into our sky sphere, we can adjust the intensity quite easily by setting sun brightness to around 1. Then, back in our directional light, we can fine-tune the look with our bloom scale. In short order, you should have some beautiful God rays streaming into your scene. Excellent. Okay, now that we have our scene looking fairly good, we just need to add some dynamism to our scene. Right now we have no visual movement, nor do we have much interplay of light. It is sorely needed here, so in the next tutorial I'm going to introduce you to the idea and concept of an actor. With actors, we will create and place some highly engaging fiery lamps to add that last bit of magic to our scene. Okay, so we are on the final stretch. Hopefully at this point you are having some fun and finding success working your way through such a large toolset. Now, the last major component I want to introduce you to in this short introductory course is the concept of an actor. To keep it simple, while also remaining more or less accurate, let's fit it into the world of a movie set. So far, we have a level, which we can think of as a blank empty space in which to build our set. The set itself is mostly comprised of static meshes, lights, and other non-moving assets. Now we are going to introduce an actor. Actors are made up of the same things that go into a level, but because they exist as a singular entity, it is easy to give them some simple life. We will start by dipping our toe in the water just so we can start to see what's possible. But as you advance your skill, you will eventually be able to make extremely complex interactive elements which can have far more than just a little life. Okay, so let's dig in. Let's start by ensuring our content browser is at the root level and that our filters are all disabled. Okay, cool. Now let's go ahead and right-click to create a new folder. Let's call this one BP_actors for Blueprint Actors. Great. Now, inside that folder, let's right-click and select Blueprint class, then Actor from the subsequent menu. Excellent. Let's name it BP_lamp. Great. Let's open it up. Now, an actor is a kind of container much like the level, so we will need to populate our lamp actor with some elements. In the content browser, use the search to locate Iron Torch. Once found, drag it into the BP lamp viewport. It's a little tricky, but with some finesse, I'm sure you'll get it. Okay, so now we have the torch in the actor. Great. Now let's go ahead and search the content folder for P_fire. Drag this into the window as well. You can maximize this window now, as we won't need any more content from the browser. Now, the last element we will need will be a light source. In the Components menu, found here on the top left of the actor window, let's add a point light. Great. Now, you'll notice some similarities to our normal level editor. On the top left, we have a list of assets related to this actor. This is similar to the World Outliner. On the right, we have a detail panel, just like what we will have in the level editor. We also have some new tools on the bottom left. These are for using Blueprint. Let's not worry about that stuff quite yet. Okay, cool. Now, let's go ahead and ensure our hierarchy is flat. It's easy to have them nest accidentally, so let's go ahead and make sure they're unparented. To unparent a nested object, simply drag it to the root itself and say attach. Okay, great. All my elements are now at the root level. Now let's go ahead and move our flames up where it sits correctly in the basket. Nice. Okay, now let's do the same for our light. This time I'm going to go a little bit above. Okay, perfect. Let's compile, save, and close the window. For now, just think of the compile button as a save to game button. When you make changes, you want the engine to pick them all up. You need to do both save and compile for that to happen. Okay, cool. Let's go ahead and close this window for a moment. Now in the BP Actors folder, let's go ahead and drop our BP lamp into the scene. Feel free to replicate it a few times as your scene requires. Excellent. Looking good, huh? Now let's take one more step to give it just a tad more life. Okay, reopen the Blueprint lamp. Now, click on the Event Graph tab. In it, we can program all sorts of things, and in this lesson, we are going to do something extremely simple, making the lights flicker. To navigate in the event graph, right-click and drag to move around. Use the mouse wheel to zoom in and out. Okay, so if we look, there are some rather useful nodes available to us right from the start. These starting nodes are called events. Events trigger actions. In this case, we will use the Begin Play event to get our lights to flicker. Let's first drag off from the event triangle on the Begin Play event node. This will allow us to call an action. Let go of the drag and search for the term delay in the resulting window. You should find a node called delay. Now the delay node will be expecting a duration input. Drag off that input and search for random and locate the random float in range node. Once found, set its values to 0 for the min and 0.2 for the max. Great. We now have a delay that will wait for a random duration between 0 and 0.2 seconds. Next, let's drag in a reference to our point light. Great. Now let's pull out from the point light and search for the term intensity. Now let's copy the random float node and paste it near our intensity node and set its min and max values to 900 and 3000 respectively. Now let's connect our delay node's event line to our intensity node. Okay, great. Our graph should look something like this. As we can see, we first wait for a random amount of time. Then we will tell our light to adjust its intensity to a random brightness. Now we just need to repeat that indefinitely. To do this, just drag off the end of our intensity node and plug it back into the front of the delay node. Now we have created an endless loop which will constantly change the intensity and the duration of time. Before we leave, let's set our light's attenuation radius to something a bit more practical. Let's set it to something like 500. While we are here, let's also set the light color to something a bit more orangish and fiery. Great. I think that should do it. Now let's save, compile, and close our actor. In order to see the actor run, we need to hit play as it only executes during runtime. Now you can see we have a nice believable light flicker. Pretty cool, huh? Without getting too deeply into the subject, we have one last task in order to finalize the light in our scene. We need to bake our lighting. If you look in the shadow areas, you may still notice that some of our shadows say Preview in them. To bake our lighting, simply click the side of the Build button and drag down to Build Lighting. This will take all of our assets and bake in the lighting information. As you progress, you will certainly want to delve into this topic, especially if lighting is a critical task for you. Okay, cool. Once our lighting is built, you should see your lighting improved and the preview missing from the shadows. If you move objects into your scene, however, be aware that you will need to rebake your lighting. Anyhow, you now have all the tools you need to get started in UE4. When tweaked just right, this lesson should provide you with a beautifully lit, high-quality scene. This is where I got mine to with just a few lighting tweaks. Feel free to adjust, add, and continue at your own leisure. Okay, so that is going to conclude your first hour in Unreal. Hopefully UE4 is a little less intimidating than it had been, and that you feel a bit more willing to delve in deeper. There is a lot to learn in here, and even after this first hour, we have yet to scratch the surface of what's possible. That said, you now have some chops to start digging in and not being lost in a foreign world. Thanks for letting me guide you into Unreal. It was a pleasure, and I hope to see you again in future tutorials.